Hey, I'm Cedric Hawkins. Welcome to the CedTalks Podcast. My guest today is a student at the School of Visual Arts in Manhattan, New York. She's a creative individual, someone who's persevered in her life, and I'm proud to have her on the show today. Right now, here is Grace Pomilla. Grace, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, how have you been? How has life been treating you?
It's been really great. I'm having a really good time at school, and everything's going well. So, yeah, not much to complain about.
Right, yeah, absolutely. I know with the pandemic...
How are you?
Oh, I've been great. Just been chilling, work, school, just trying to balance everything and live life as best as I can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know the one thing I've been working on is trying to balance work and then rest. That's probably the biggest thing I've been trying to balance, because I always have my priorities in check, and there's nothing wrong with doing everything you're supposed to do, but you should also have time to rest at the same time, which is what I've been trying to teach myself and not overdo it. I don't know if you struggle with that also, but that's something internally I've been working on.
Definitely. Yeah. I've been trying to instill a morning routine into my schedule. So I'm trying to do yoga in the morning and journal and relax a little bit before heading on with the day and stuff.
Yeah, I implemented a morning routine back in January, I want to say. So it's I wake up and I eat breakfast, or I do homework for a little bit, and then I go work out, and then that's how I pretty much start my day. And sometimes I'll take a break on the weekends and rest for 2 days and then get back on it again. But it's weird how I learned that having a routine, it pretty much keeps you structured and you feel really organized.
Yeah, some days I'll forget to do it and I just feel so much worse. It's so great to just have that little amount of structure. It's so, perfect.
Yeah. Do you have I know you said you journal. Do you map out everything that you do?
I kind of just journal about my day, and I try to write a little bit every day because I am in film school, so I try to do write a little bit of a script every day or read a little bit of a book or something just to keep my brain moving in a different direction other than school.
Yeah, I feel you. Sticky notes are my thing. That's how I journal thing. And I'm a writer also. So if I'm at work and if I get inspired to do something, I'll take out my little notepad and jot something down and write it down just to keep the creative mind of mine still flowing, to make sure I don't forget anything. Yeah. In the middle of the pandemic, or what we're still going through the pandemic, how have you really relied on your family? What do they mean to you?
I know it's cheesy, but they mean everything to me. I love all my sisters. I have 4 sisters. They're all a lot older than me. My sister Veronica's 30. My sister Mary's 29. My sister Maddie is 27, and my sister Caroline is 26. And then I'm 19. So it's a pretty big age gap, but somehow we're still extremely close, and we all talk all day, every day. And we have sister dinner every week, or at least we try to. Some weeks when the pandemic was super bad, we wouldn't see each other, but yeah. I love my family, and I love my dad too. We all adore my dad.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I know being so far away, having a distance in age, usually that would create a disconnect between some siblings, but that's awesome that you still have that connection with them and you all relate to each other in some capacity.
Yeah, we all talk every day, and 3 of my sisters also live in New York with me, so we'll try to hang out as much as possible and stuff. Obviously, with the pandemic, it's a little harder, but I still try to see them as much as possible.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. I know my brother, he is 5 years younger than me, so there's a 5-year age gap. But I still try to connect with them in ways that I can. I'll talk about anime with him. I'm really not into anime like that as other people, but I don't mind learning stuff from him. And then my cousins, we're all brothers, because we're all 1 year apart. So pretty much we're linked together like that. And there's no disconnect between us, even though I'm the youngest in the group, so even though there's a disconnect in age, we're still close and connected together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you still feel you'll still maintain that bond with your sisters as time goes on, and the more you get busy with school and work and everything, you still feel you'll have that connection with them?
I feel our bond has gone even stronger, over the years, because when I was, around 10 or 5 or so, they were 16. So it was more we had different lives at that point. So it's interesting to be in their situation, going and seeing, when Mary was 19, she was doing this, and now I'm doing this, and so I feel like I learn more about them as I grow up and reach the ages that they were and like what I thought of them at that age. It's really cool.
Yeah, I agree. Like touching back on with my cousins, how I'm the youngest in the group. It's like when I hit the age that they were at like years ago, it seems like I'm doing the same thing that they're doing and I'm maturing just like they are. So it's freaky how life works in itself and how you mature and develop over time. I think you should mature and develop over time. You shouldn't still be acting like a 15-year-old at 19 or 20. But I find that fascinating also that you can relate to them as you continue to age and develop.
Yeah, definitely. And also like going back to that, like with our bond and stuff, I feel like over time also it's just become like more special. Like we all support each other more because when we were younger, we'd all like bicker a little bit more.
Right.
Because we were with each other and on each other's toes all the time. So it's been really cool to see us all like we have our own space, we have our own lives, but then when we get together, it's like a really special like experience.
Right. In terms of your interests and goals, are they all the same or are you each different in your shared hobbies and passions and what you all want out of life?
So my two oldest sisters, Mary and Veronica, also work in film just like I want to. And my sister Maddie and her boyfriend Brian are starting to get their foot in the door with working in film as well. And so like with that, I think that like we're all kind of connected. But my sister Caroline is kind of the odd one out regarding like film and also location. She lives in DC while we live in New York. And she's more into, like, writing poetry and reading literature, and she was, like, an English major.
Like me.
Yeah. She wanted to be a teacher for a really long time, too. So, yeah, she's a real bookworm.
Yeah.
But we all love to be outside, and we, like, share, like, a common interest of, like, exercise and fitness. Mm-hmm. And, so me and my sister Mary and my sister Maddie have, like, recently been, like, surfing in New York, because there's, like, a little surf scene in Long Island.
Interesting.
And it's been super fun to surf in like the cold, like because I started surfing in October and I was like, it's too cold to surf. Why would I go? But then once you put the wetsuit on, you're not cold at all, which is surprising. But it was really fun. But I did get caught in a riptide while we were surfing. Luckily, we survived because Maddie's boyfriend Brian saved us. But it was terrible because everyone like swam out to get me. And then they all got stuck in the riptide as well. It was crazy. Yeah,
that's like my main fear of oceans is getting caught in a riptide and just not being able to get out. Like that.
Oh my God.
That's what keeps me away from the ocean. Like I can remember being a kid, always wanting to be a scuba diver. Like, oh, I want to swim in the ocean. And then you hear these stories about people getting caught in riptides and they drown. And it's like, no, I think I'm fine doing that. It's scary.
I didn't realize how severe it was until afterwards.
Right.
But then I was like, whoa.
Right.
That would have been terrible.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, we also all love to run, and I did cross country and track in high school, and my two sisters, Maddie and Mary, have ran several marathons. So, Maddie also ran a super marathon, which is a 50K. I used to run 5Ks for cross country. 50K is literally 10 times the amount of a 5K, which is insane. And she took third place, which I'm so proud of her for that. But yeah, my mom loved doing marathons, so that's, I think, where we get it from.
Yeah, it's nice being able to talk to someone who actually likes to run. Like, I'm a runner. That's my main mean of exercising. So in the winter, it was devastating not being able to run in the cold. And especially, I don't even have a treadmill in my basement anymore. And so that was tough. But it seems like every guest that I have on, they like going to the gym and lifting and stuff. So it's refreshing to talk to someone that loves to run so much.
Does your brother like to run?
No, he stays in the house. I can't get him out the house to save his life.
Do you have any hobbies that you share with him or interests?
Just video games pretty much. But besides that, it's like a disconnect. And that's funny because thinking about me and my cousins, it's like I'm the odd one out. Like I like to read, I like to write, do poetry and all that stuff, and just do stuff on my own. They love football and basketball. Like they'll meet up and they'll play basketball on the court. I hate that. Like I hate basketball. I like to watch it casually, but as far as like playing it, I'm not as athletic on the court like that. And so it used to be a hard time because I always wanted to hang with them, but I used to hate playing basketball, but we all created a balance to where I can still hang out with them while also they can respect my boundaries and know that Ced has his own interests in mind, and we're not going to judge him for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's pretty cool to be able to have close bonds, relationships with family, and still be so different at the same time, think differently,
Definitely.
but yet still stay close.
Yeah, it's really special.
Yeah.
I'm really happy that I'm so lucky. That's like the only word I can describe it as.
Right. What was your relationship like with your mother? Like, what was that like looking back on it?
So, I think that it's like hard for me to remember kind of because she like passed when I was really young. But, like from what I've heard and what like the little pieces I remember, like I was the youngest, so I was her baby and she adored me and I adored her. And I like couldn't leave her side. I refused to sleep in my room because I'd be away from her. Like I think until she passed, I slept in her room. So like till I was 10, I would always stay in her room. I had a room. I had a really pretty room actually, but I refused to stay in it. And yeah, I think that the reason like I can't remember anything is like because of her passing. Like most of my sisters don't remember like we just have a really bad memory, I guess, about everything. It's not just her. But I just remember how I felt. I don't remember the moment, I guess. So like I remember I felt happy and loved and special. And all you can think like once a parent has passed is just like stories upon stories upon stories. Like all you think about is, oh, remember that one time, or oh, this time was so funny when we did that thing, and that's all I think about. But so even though I have a bad memory, I've been going through my home videos recently and digitizing them and putting them on the internet. Mm-hmm. And all my memories are brought back to me. Like we have hundreds of tapes and hours of footage, and I just remember like my sisters would shoot movies on the camcorder ever since they were young. So I've been able to piece her back together a little bit more than I used to. But yeah, it's been really nice to look at the footage because while going through it, like I realized why we all do film now because all we would do is make movies. But yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. I know with me, with my great-grandparents, I only remember them when they were sick. My great-grandfather, he had a stroke, so he couldn't really talk to me during my adolescence. Mm-hmm. And then my great-grandmother, she had Alzheimer's, and she just passed away after a 11 to 12-year battle with it. So she didn't remember much of me, but it's like the only vivid memory I have of them is giving me a banana when I was like 4 or 5 years old. And my aunt, she was able to find footage of like this camcorder footage from the 60s and 70s of just them going around the house and just filming everything, just filming them in everyday situations and settings. And it's cool because now I can see them in a different way than when they were sick. And so it's nice to be able to have those memories. Even like, it's crazy. Like, I mean, the footage looks so great for something recorded in the 60s and 70s. So yeah. I think that's incredible to be able to reflect on that.
I love working with camcorders because it really was so special to have one at that time. And so it's super interesting to see, like, what life was like and how people were reacting to the camera and how, like, present everyone was. It's really cool. Yeah, I don't know. One memory that sticks out to me about my mom is, like, she was super witty and super funny, and she makes Calvert County look so fun in the videos that I've seen. And I'm just like, I would never have thought to do the things she would do in the town, even though they're very simple things. She just made everyday tasks super fun. Like, I was looking at one the other day, and it's just, we were all eating dinner, and then all of a sudden, everybody bursts into a dance party. And it was just so fun. I don't know. Everything about it made me so nostalgic and miss that time. But it was really happy to look upon.
Yeah, my mom, and my aunt's sister, she passed away when I was 2.5 going on 3. So obviously I don't have any memories of her whatsoever. And then my cousin, he was a baby too, so he doesn't have those memories of her. And I'm sure we were around her lots of times, but it's just that memory isn't there. So it's nice to hear stories from her and hear how witty and comical she was. And my mom would tell me like the traits of my cousins, that's pretty much their mother in a nutshell, and how they were and how she was. So it's like the stories is very fascinating, and that's how their memory and their legacy lives on pretty much, is through those stories.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always get like told, oh my gosh, you're acting so much like your mom right now, or something like that, from just people, like older people that know my mom or something, and it's really interesting to hear because it's things that I wouldn't think were like her, and then I remember her a little bit better, and I'm like, oh, I guess I am a lot like her in some ways. I just didn't even realize it, you know?
Yeah. Leading up to her passing, how did that affect you from a mental standpoint? Was it sudden, or was it something that gradually happened over time?
So she was in a very serious car accident a couple months before she passed, and I remember going to the hospital to see her after her accident, and she was all injured, and I knew things would be very different from then on. I remember thinking I'd have to grow up super quickly and help my mom more and do more things for myself. And I also, like, began to rely on my dad more, so it kind of, once she passed, made the transition a little less hard because I was already more reliant on my dad at that point, because just for things even as simple as driving me to soccer practice, my mom was physically unable to, so my dad would do it. And I feel so bad for him because he just was always busy, he's a crazy worker, he's a very hard worker, so he'd like go from work to my practice, to my other sister's practice, to my other sister's practice, because there's 5 of us, you know, so it was a lot. But after the accident, she was in and out of the hospital a lot, and I would visit her, and so I knew her health was, like, frail, but I wasn't prepared for when she passed. It was a shock, but, yeah, in some ways, like, the accident made me realize that she wasn't going to be 100% ever again, which was a really hard thing to go through.
Right, yeah. I would say with my dad's passing, because we're coming up on 6 months now, you know, later on next week, I think, next Sunday it'll be 6 months, and that was very sudden. I mean, nobody expected it. You know, looking back on it, I can tell he was sick, like he was losing weight, and I just attribute that to, maybe he's just getting older, or, you know, he's on a diet, and his face looked kind of older, and it's like, oh, he's getting old, and then you come home from work and you expect, you know, him to be there, and then you get that knock on the door from the police, and it was very sudden. Like, I had no time really whatsoever to prepare for it. It just hit me in that moment. So it's like, at the same time, I'm blessed to have 20 years of memories with him, but, you know, at the same time, there's still a lot of things that are left unsaid that I wish I could have said.
Yes, exactly. It's just a lot of, like, puzzle pieces that you're trying to put together, trying to, like, understand. Like, when somebody dies, they leave, like, you with all these memories, and like, they leave a piece of themselves with you, but you also are left, like, when they've passed, they take a piece of you with you, so you get kind of all wrapped up in a weird way, and you feel like a part of you's missing, because it's a hard thing to go through.
It is. Yeah, thank you. And it's like, it really was. Like, I had to really pick up the pieces and, you know, carry on. As hard as it is, I can't say it was, because I'm still going through with it, because I had to keep going to college. I had to keep going to work after the 2nd and 3rd week. And it's almost like people expect you to, you know, sometimes be at your best. And that was tough. Like, I'm blessed to have gotten through that period of time, but it's like, I'm still going through it currently.
Yeah, there's this book that I've been reading about trauma and grief, and it's called The Body Keeps the Score. And in it, like, one of the quotes it says in it is just, it really sticks in my brain, is it's something about, like, it was, how horrific experiences cause people to stay in the past? And it really is, you're just stuck, like, you're frozen, you can't move, you can't, like, think any differently, you're just really stuck when that person was still there. And it has really stuck with me, that quote.
Right, yeah. When she passed away, did you get any closure before she left? Were you able to say some things that you wanted to say to her beforehand?
I don't really remember.
Right.
Like, it gets really tricky sometimes, because I have such a bad memory, but I'm trying to think. I mean, she knew I loved her. I think the last words I said to her were, I love her, but that's the one thing that I really wish I remembered, is the last thing I said to her. I remember I was like, she said she was going to go to bed early, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go hang out with my friends, and then I left, but I think I said I love you before I left, and I think that's the last thing we said to each other, but I don't remember, which really sucks, because I want to know. I wish I remembered.
Yeah, that's the same with me with my memory of, like the 24 hours in between before my dad passed. Like, I think that night, he was in the kitchen and I was in the kitchen too, and we were just, shuffling around, doing things, talking back and forth, but I can't really remember the conversation we had. And my dad wasn't the type to, hey, son, let's sit down and talk about how you're feeling today. Like, let's talk about, your emotions. I don't think I really ever said I love you, to him. I think I probably did over text, and then he probably wouldn't say it back to me, but it was through his actions that made me know that he loved me. And then, that morning of, I could hear him in the kitchen talking, and I was in my room, and I wasn't ready to come out of my room. It's early in the morning. I didn't feel like getting up, and he was just in the kitchen on his way to work, and then, I didn't see him, and so that hurts, and then that stings. I didn't get to see him, alive for that final period. So like that's my memory.
Yeah, I remember like also just although I obviously am heartbroken that she passed away so young in my life, in some ways it is like I'm trying to see a silver lining with it, and it makes me happy that I was so young in some ways because it made our relationship and our love so pure. There was no like teenage fight that I had with her or anything that like could have ruined what we had, which makes it so upsetting, but also like it makes my heart warm to know that we just had such a pure, loving relationship. Like the only time she probably was upset with me was when I was like a toddler,
Right.
So like when I wouldn't go to bed or something. So it makes me happy in some ways that like it was just such a pure, loving relationship that I was in.
Yeah, I agree. And, I do believe there's a silver lining on my part, too, with everything that's happened now. I think I've really gotten closer with God in my faith. I've really relied on my faith to get me through it. And I think through my obedience, God has blessed me with different opportunities and different things that probably wouldn't have happened even if he was still on, this earth. So, even though there's still a lot of pain, a lot of trauma mentally going on, I still do believe that there is a silver lining in all of this. And, hopefully when I get to the end of the tunnel and, this is all said and done and I'm able to not be too emotional about it and I'm healed from it, I think there will be a silver lining in it. Yeah. So afterwards, what was the support like from family and friends after her passing?
So, all my family drove down for the funeral, and the support we had was amazing. So many neighbors and family members cooked us dinners, and I remember she passed a couple days before actually the day before my sister's birthday. So I just remember the next day we had like 10 cakes, and we couldn't eat all of them, so we started like pushing people's faces into the cakes and stuff, trying to like spark up some joy and like joke around a little bit. But yeah, I just remember being so shocked by how many people's lives she touched. I remember going to the nail salon even like a year after or so, and we hadn't gotten our nails done in a year because we were like so depressed and stuff. But I remember going with my sister, and the lady asked like, "How's your mom doing?" And we didn't know what to tell her, and we finally like broke the news to her, and she obviously like she couldn't speak English that well, and so she was trying to explain to us that she was praying for us, and she just kept going, "Pray, pray, I'll pray." And we were just like so heartwarmed. We felt so bad. She was so sweet to us. But yeah, just things like that. I remember like even my orthodontist was like tearing up talking about her because he loved her so much. There were so many people that she touched. But yeah, even with that, like a couple months after she passed, the wave of initial support fades away. As I don't know if you're at that point yet, but it does hurt in a weird way to like know all these people that were just like at like your place after the funeral or something. They have to go home and they have to live their lives too. But after that support faded away, my Aunt Karen lives down in Solomon's, and she began to spend more time with me. She like would drive the hour up, and she would teach me how to cook and bake, and she gave me a sense of normalcy throughout all the craziness that was happening. And soon it became a tradition that like on Thursdays I would see my Aunt Karen and we would cook a meal and like have dinner together. And she doesn't have any children of her own, so she grew to be almost like a maternal bond with her, and I still talk to her to this day, and we talk like every week, and we just catch up on each other's lives. And Yeah, it's a really special feeling. But how has the support been for you?
The support's been very great, especially in those first initial weeks when it first happened. Like, people who I haven't talked to in probably weeks or years were like reaching out and supporting me, offering me their condolences. At work, people were very supportive and patient with me, and they worked with me, especially when we're working with kids and it's very stressful doing online schooling and everything. They were very supportive as well, and even my family too. Like, family supported me. People were taking me out for lunch and dinner, just showing me that they really cared. And like you said, that silence comes afterwards, and that was very tough, because it was like people, they went back to living their lives, and it's almost like I'm here by myself at night in my room, with these thoughts, these emotions, and I don't want to feel this way. I feel like, as a man, I shouldn't be crying. I shouldn't be feeling this way. And it was really hard to vocalize that to somebody, especially when I wanted to be the strong one, the one who was holding, everybody up. But I've learned that, when it comes to being a rock for people, you have to have someone to support you also. And so I'm still going through it. I'll have moments where I'll accomplish something big. Like, back in December, I got a new car, and my grandmother was like, well, are you happy? Did having a new car makes you happy? I was like, I'm happy that, God feels like I'm ready for this next step. But at the same time, I'm still kind of grieving. And it's like, when you accomplish all of these things, it's like people expect you to be happy, and they expect all of your problems from months past to go away. And it's just like, no, they're still there, and they still pop up, and they still affect me from time to time. And so it's hard. It's hard, but I still try my best every day.
Yeah, I remember, like, the first year is so hard, and I'm glad that you're so open to talking about it. I think that's a really important thing that you seem to be doing, and I'm really proud of you for taking that step, honestly, because the first year is hard. Like, all you think about is that person constantly. And even to this day, like, on my prom day or on graduation day, I'm just like, she's not here. I miss her. I don't know where she is. Like, I hope she's okay,
Yeah.
So it makes me happy that you're, like, vocalizing these things, because I think it's super healthy to do that.
Yeah, I think by, like, the second month, I think I was keeping a lot of stuff inside and trying to, appear okay. And I wasn't really talking to anybody, because that's something that I didn't do prior to him passing. I always kept my problems to myself, or I would talk to my therapist about it and not to any other family. And then that stuff just kept building up. And then, the week of Thanksgiving break, that was just my breaking point. Like, I don't think I've cried that much ever in my life until, like, that week, because that's when it really kind of sank in. And it was, like you said, to the point where everyone had left, and they had pretty much went on with their lives, and you're left feeling the pieces, because even though I wasn't actively crying, openly crying at the funeral or the first 2-3 weeks, like, I was still affected by it, and it really hit me at that point. And it took a while for me to find those key people to talk to when I get in that mood, but once I found them, it made everything more easier to just talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Even, like, with, like, when all the people leave, also, I feel like you're left with this kind of, you feel even more stuck, It's a really hard feeling, but you also do find like, people who are still there. Like, for example, with me, my Aunt Karen just has stayed with me, and we've had an amazing relationship through it. Like, people really will come out of the woodwork and show you, like, how much they care about you, and it's amazing when they stay, but also it is just so kind that people even did, like you said, people you didn't talk to for years just all of a sudden are coming up to you and saying how much you mean to them, or how much your dad meant to them, and it's so, like, bittersweet, it really hurts, but it's kind of a good hurt, because you're just feeling so much love, Also, from that book that I read, like, I saw another thing that they said in it is, like, human suffering is mostly caused by love and loss. And so I think that grief is just, like, such a mixture of the two, that it really messes with you, And it's tricky, because everyone's grieving a different way, and everyone's going to grieve somebody in their life. So at least one person, many people probably.
Yeah, exactly. Like, back in January, I had to turn my tags in for my old car and replace it with my new car. So my granddad told me to go to the tag and title place in Dunkirk because the lady there was well acquainted with my dad and she was going to take care of me. But I live close to Prince Frederick, so in my mind, I'm thinking, you know what, I should probably just go to Prince Frederick. And then, like, out of nowhere in my mind, I was just like, you know what, I'm going to Dunkirk. And so I went in, and the lady recognized my name, and she was like, was your father Lamont? I was like, yeah, that was my father. And she was like, I'm so, sorry about your loss. He would come in here and joke around, and we would joke all the time, and it really affected me. So she let me turn my tags in for free. I didn't even have to pay. I didn't have to pay the $15, which was great because money was tight then at the time. So it is nice to have that support, but I think something I've learned is that I have to reach out to people to get that support because, like I said earlier, they see me doing all of these different things, just trying to stay busy, and they assume that I'm happy. But, sometimes internally I'm not. And so that was tough, having to open up to people.
Definitely.
Yeah. What is the importance of giving yourself permission to grieve? Because I know in this society, in this world, some people just don't get it until you're in the midst of grieving yourself. What's the importance of giving yourself time to grieve, in your opinion?
So, luckily, my family has always been super supportive and, hyper vigilant about making sure I'd be able to grieve properly. Since I was so young, they were trying to lessen my trauma and make sure that I was comfortable expressing my emotions. And so they allowed me to do therapy. I was fortunate enough to do therapy. I'm so lucky I was able to. And they would always try to have open conversations with me. And I think that with all of the lessons I learned with doing therapy and grieving for almost 10 years, I think that, the biggest thing I learned with, permission to grieve is that everyone grieves differently. So I think that if you know that, then you'll have a more forgiving time accepting people who are also grieving, and just to know that grief isn't always pretty and that we're all going to grieve at some point in our lives. So try to not let it, define you. At least that's my standpoint on it. I try to not let it define me. Like I said, I'm adamant on not letting my grief define me. And with that being said, people tend to be shocked when they find out I've lost a parent, or, because I don't seem like it, or I don't seem deep enough, or I haven't gone through something like that, or I'm upbeat, or I'm smiley and giggly, I must be over it. But I'm not, and I think that being aware that I'm not over it and, allowing people to know that, I'm still a person, I'm still a human, just because I'm smiling, just because, just how you're saying I'm busy, it doesn't mean that I'm doing well, I'm just distracting myself almost, it's some people just don't understand that, and I try to show them that that's what I'm going through, listen, I don't want, a pity card or anything, but I'm just letting you know, I have hard days, too. Some years I have really good years, and then some years it just hits me like a wave, and I can't get through it, with this quarantine and all. I remember, going on walks with my friend Lily Bridges, and we would just both sit there and talk about, what happened in our childhood that, made us act the way we do or think the way we think, and, it really messed me up, and I lost a lot of friends because of the way I was acting at that time, because I was just thinking about myself in a way that was, hyper fixated. And I'm glad I went through that. I'm really, grateful for how everything has turned out in my life so far, especially with that time that I had during quarantine. But it was really hard to go through. There were days where I would just, sit in bed and just be, staring at a wall thinking about, how even though I've had such a lucky experience going to therapy and having an open relationship, talking with my family and stuff, I could still have so much, work to do. I'm still, even though it's been almost 10 years, I'm still, in some ways stuck, and I think I'll never be fully, fixed, fully cured. I don't let it define me. I don't want people to sit there and feel bad for me constantly, but I just I try to, like, just to acknowledge that you're never going to 100% be better, you know?
Right. Yeah, I agree. And I think that was something that I still struggle with also, is just like, I don't let it define me. I know that's for sure. Like, I'm not talking every podcast episode like, oh, my dad passed away and all that. Like, I don't constantly bring it up because, like you said, I don't want everybody's pity. I don't want anyone looking down on me and whatnot. But I do have days where, today's just not the day. And subconsciously, I may not even know why today may not be the day. And that will force me to really, go somewhere quiet and really think about why I'm feeling sad or feeling, mad or irritable, like for no reason. And it could be because I'm missing my dad, but I don't realize that, or, selfishly, I'm refusing to acknowledge that because I don't want to bring those emotions back up to the surface. And
yeah.
I know with some people, it was hard for them to really understand because they offered their support and they showed me sympathy, but I would go to people and they wouldn't give me any empathy just because they couldn't really relate to that. And so with that taught me to put people in different categories of who I open myself up to if I'm not having a bad day, and just who to talk to about the situation. Because sometimes my heart got broken. People would tell me to, stop whining, stop moaning, or pouting around, acting like Eeyore. Like, get happy, get your joy back. And it was very confusing information, but once I had to understand that, everybody grieves differently, and, just because I'm busy for 4 or 5 days and then I get sad for one day, that's not a bad thing. I shouldn't, beat myself up because of that.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, I agree. I remember sophomore year, I was talking to this, like, old lady at school, and somebody had passed, I think, like a famous person or something, and she was like, people should take 2 days to grieve and that's it. Like, you should be over it by then. And I was like, that's the way she grieves. I'm going to let her do that, but she can't tell other people to grieve a certain way. Because even today, like, I was acting crazy for months. Not crazy, but I was just, like, I was so in my head for months, and, like, over quarantine, and then I realized one day, I was like, oh, I'm still processing something. I'm still grieving. I'm still figuring myself out, And I think that we just all need to be a little more accepting with each other about, like, if somebody's acting off, they're probably in something and don't even know it themselves, They're probably going through something and don't even realize how deep they're in it,
Right, and I think that also ties into other people's expectations of grief and how you should be behaving and reacting. Because, like I said, some people just, they don't understand it. Like, prior to my dad passing, I didn't know what grief was and what it was really like. I had uncles and aunts that passed away, but nothing really hit me close to home like losing my own father, Like, that was the first time I really ever lost anyone. So my perspective on grief, changed because of that. And even though I want to knock somebody for not understanding how I feel, it's like at the same time they're not going through it. But
yeah,
I just wish people would listen more instead of just hearing and then giving their own opinion on it.
I agree. I think that, like, the treatment that people give me after they find out, they assume I'm, like, super emotionally fragile and begin to walk on eggshells. And if anything, I feel emotionally stronger from all of this. And I hope that I don't want anything terrible to happen to anybody they love, but one day they'll be there with me and they'll understand, hopefully. And I just personally wish, like, people wouldn't treat me any different because I'm not my trauma, but, like, another person might want to be treated with more caution. It's just, like, it really depends on, like, other people, and grief is so tricky. And, like, another issue I have is, like, boundaries, because in certain situations I've been in, people have, like, because I cope with, like, laughter. I cope with making jokes about things and playing it off cool. But, so I'll make, like, a joke here and there about, like, my, like, loss of a mother. Not, it sounds really bad when I say it like that, but I'll say a joke that only I should be able to make, but then my friends think they're okay to say a joke like that, and it's not cool. I'm like, don't joke about that stuff. It's only like a me and my sisters kind of thing, like, we can make, like, a little joke here and there, but it's not, I think that people need to know their boundaries and know their friends' boundaries, because you need to make sure that they know if you're not comfortable, you know?
Right, yeah. That was probably the toughest thing in the beginning at work, especially, because there's probably one or two people that talked to me as if I was still said. And that was great, but it was like everybody else would walk on eggshells around me. You know, they would say hey to me, but they wouldn't talk to me like they used to. And I can remember going to my bosses, like, you know, like, what's going on? And they were just like, no, it's not you. They just don't know how to, you know, approach the subject. They don't want to upset you, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
I know one thing with me with boundaries is that if I'm not really feeling about talking about my dad, then I don't want it to be brought up. Like,
Yeah.
I love my grandfather to death. Shout out to my grandfather. But sometimes he'll bring it up and it just be like, like I didn't want you to say that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it gets to a point where you just have to acknowledge and say, look, you know, don't mention him unless I want you to mention him. Because I'm sure he doesn't do it out of spite. You know, it's just, he's just telling a story. But, you know, some days I just don't want to hear it because that brings back an emotional memory that I just don't want to tap into right now.
Yeah, I totally get that. I feel like when my friends try to, like, poke fun at my situation or something, they're doing it out of love. They're trying to relate to me, and I appreciate what they're trying to do, but it's just my personal way of grieving, you know, and it's hard because it's tricky because I want people to treat me normal, but then I have this issue where I don't want them to, like, it's all about lines. There's these invisible lines that you're trying to make people understand, and you're trying to understand about people, so it can get really tricky sometimes.
Right, absolutely. When did you get to a point in your life where you felt comfortable grieving in your own way without looking for other people's expectations and what they expected out of you?
So I feel like I always had that option to be able to grieve because of the way my family focused on me, because all my other sisters were in high school when I was in elementary school, so they were really trying to make sure I always had felt comfortable to grieve, and I'm so fortunate for that. They're an amazing support system, and I'm so lucky that I have them. So I think I have always just felt comfortable to grieve. But how have you allowed yourself to grieve?
You know, I try not to force it out of myself. I know that's something that I kind of struggle with because in the beginning I didn't really... I cried probably to myself, but, you know, I wasn't as emotional about it as other people. So there'd be some days I'd open up the picture book, and now I'm really emotional about it when, let's say, I have a Zoom class coming up or I have to go to work. So now I'm carrying that negative... I don't want to say negative energy because it's not negative, but I'm carrying this sadness, this gray cloud into what I'm doing. And some people, they don't vibe with that. They don't connect with that. So they disconnect from you. And then that just becomes a battle of, oh, well, people don't want to mess with me because I'm, you know, grieving or I'm upset. So I don't force myself anymore, but on my days off, I try to, you know, think about it more. Like I could be going on a run and a memory of my dad will pop up. And or it could be a memory of the funeral or like, you know, that week of when it happened. Just it could be something sad, and instead of trying to push it away, I try to, you know, think about it and I, you know, reflect on it. But I also try to think of the good things. I think of that, you know, he's not sick anymore. He's not in any pain, and he's up in heaven probably, you know, rejoicing and at peace with himself. So I always try to think of the good. It's definitely hard, especially when I miss him so much and I wish he was, you know, here with me still. But on my days off, I give that time to myself. And if I'm really emotional, I'll just reach out to somebody at the end of the day and cry my eyes out. And then I'll go to sleep and I'll wake up fine in the morning. Like, it's like the Bible says, when there's weeping at night, joy comes in the morning. So I always find that joy in the morning when I finish crying about my dad.
Yeah, it's super tricky because some days, like, I remember I would just be so normal, and then the next day I'd be, like, at my friend's house, and then something would trigger something in me that would make me just all of a sudden start, like crying, like sobbing, and I'd have to leave or something, you know? I always had issues with, like, controlling it, I guess. I think I obviously now have a really good understanding of it, but at first it was just really hard, because sometimes it's hard when you've had all these amazing memories with somebody and then they just end. You can't have any more. It's so cruel, you know? You wish you could have more memories, but that's the only thing that stops, you know? They're still there, though, you know?
Yeah, they are. And it's like you only got 10 years with your mother. Like I can sit here and crow that I only got 20 years with my dad, but you only had 10 and you lost her as a child. Like I can't even imagine losing my dad as a child because he was such an integral part of my childhood. So, I mean, kudos to you for your bravery and getting through school during that time.
I'm really glad we're having this conversation because I do think it is interesting that we do come from different places, like with the 10-year separation. I think it's really interesting to like see the differences in the way we're like thinking and like the way that we like are mentally like figuring out our grief, you know, because when I was younger I didn't know how I was like I didn't figure it out. I just kind of sat there and told people how I felt and tried to like move on, but there were a bunch of like weird things that occurred because of that. Like I began to not be able to sleep at night. I had really bad insomnia. I actually had insomnia before my mom passed away, and I remember being like 4 or so and telling her, can I have a sleeping pill? I can't sleep. And she was like, no, you're 3, you'll die. You can't have one. But I remember like a couple months before like her accident, I went to the children's hospital and I got a diagnosis on my sleeping disorder because it was so bad. But with that, it's just interesting because from my insomnia, I developed a sleep anxiety disorder, I guess. And then from there, that manifested into obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD, as it's more commonly referred to as. And I know most people think of it as like OCD as you clean all the time and you're super like focused on cleaning things, but mine was different. Mine was focused on sleep, and so I had like weird rituals I would use every night. Like I would have to write sleep on my hand, and kids in middle school would always ask me, why do you have sleep on your hand? I'd just be like, no reason. But it was obvious there was something going on. And then I'd have to like pray, and I'd have to wear the same pajamas, and if I didn't do all of that, in my brain I couldn't sleep. And I knew it was irrational, but I couldn't stop doing it. And I just remember being like 13 or 14 and I had conquered it. And then I was like, oh, that was definitely me reacting to all of my like issues because everything around me was falling apart and I needed something to control. Even though I had all the support in the world, I needed to control something. So I tried to control my sleep schedule better. And with that, I became obsessed with it, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just interesting, like seeing the way that a kid can react to trauma sometimes, you know, like it's really odd that happened.
Yeah,
I always think about it. I'm like, what?
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, I'm glad you touched on like sleeping and like nightmares, because like, I mean, it ties into the story later on, but I didn't view my dad afterwards. Like, I was very adamant with each family member. Like, I'm not going in there until it's closed, and then I will walk in there. And so, and you know, that was my decision because I knew if I saw him in that state, I was gonna have nightmares for weeks. You know, I can only sleep with my brother in the same bed for so long until it's time for me to get back into that routine of sleeping by myself. And even now to this day, like I used to sleep with the door closed. Now I sleep with it open. And if I get up in the morning and it's 4:30, 5 o'clock, I'll shut the door and go straight back to sleep and I'll be fine. But I sleep with it open. And I used to have nightmares also in the beginning, and just dreams about like, you know, him, and then worrying that other people in my life were gonna like die too. And like nightmares are like, it's crazy because your body is so relaxed that it's so stiff and it's locked, and you can't scream out for anyone, you can't do like anything. It's crazy. Like I haven't had nightmares ever since. I probably had one a couple of weeks ago, but they've kind of faded out ever since then.
I love when I dream about my mom, and me and all my sisters do. I don't know about you, but I mean, it's really hard the first couple of years, so I understand it is just like it can completely ruin your day sometimes if you have a night or have a dream like that, because you just are like, whoa, I was with them. I felt them. I was really with them. But like at this point, I'm like, I really love it because I really feel like she's there, and me and my sisters always talk about it when that happens. We get so excited, and we're just like, oh my gosh, did you did you talk to her about this? Did you feel like this? And it's a really good time because we all feel super connected too.
Yeah, I haven't had dreams about him in a few months. I guess it's probably been a couple of months. In the beginning, I had lots of dreams about him, and it was just him and I just talking in like an empty room. And this may sound supernatural, may sound crazy, but, you know, there are some times where, you know, I'll talk to him in my head. Like, I can be doing something, and I may be doubting myself, and I can just hear his voice saying, like, you got this, like, yeah, like, go ahead and do it, man. Like, you got it. And so it's cool like that. And then sometimes I'll visualize him in certain scenarios where I'm achieving something great, and it's like him standing there watching me. So it's like those things that also helps me as well. Just keeping him in my memory, like positive things, not thinking of the negative stuff.
Yeah.
So how do you think people can shift their perspective on grief who haven't dealt with the loss? How do you think they can view an individual going through something like I'm going through or you're going through?
I think just knowing that people aren't their trauma. People are going to become something else one day that isn't what they're feeling at that moment, you know?
You're fine, go ahead.
You're fine. But, yeah, I just think that, I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Oh, no, you're good.
Do you have
I don't know. I think
that you would, like a preference for what you think about people treating you a certain way or how they...
I think people should just listen if I'm feeling a certain type of way. I mean, just sit down and listen to how I'm feeling. You may not be able to understand and resonate with it, but I mean, just listen to what I'm saying, and then maybe I do need some encouragement to get on and, you know, go to the next day. But I think just listening to what that individual is going through and offering solutions, telling them what they're good at, I think that's what will really help them out and get them out of that depressive mindset.
I think that like, I guess what I would say is, like, everyone grieves differently, and just keep that in your mind, because if you don't know that, like, or if you think that they should be over it, like, I remember in high school, like, when people that we knew would die or something, people would be like, oh, I can't believe blank and blank went to the funeral because they didn't even know him that well, or they didn't even know her that well. Like, she wouldn't want them there anyway. And it's like, you don't know what that person feels about that person. You know, like, people have, like, special relationships with everybody they meet, you know? And I think having a certain, like almost shade towards somebody for the way they're grieving is I think it's so disrespectful, and I just wish people would be more open-minded to knowing, like, maybe that person, like, knew somebody, and I don't know, like, maybe they were just really close at one point, and you wouldn't know that, you know? It really, that always bothered me, I think. And so I think just reminding yourself that people grieve differently, and also that grief isn't pretty, and, like, mental struggle isn't always, like, just crying or something. It can be mental breaks, like, it can be really ugly, and just knowing that, I think, and being more open to understanding that and respecting that.
Yeah, I know the one thing I don't like is when people say, oh, you know, your dad would want you to do this, or dad wouldn't want you to do that. I think that's such a cop-out. Like, how would you know what he would want me to do or what he wouldn't want me to do? Like, you're going to sit here and tell me that he would want me to, you know, go out and work when I'm, you know, feeling, like, really, like, depressed. Like, I know there are some things you can put to the side just so you can keep doing what you're doing, but I mean, when you're really low, really down, and you just need a break, like, you're gonna sit here and tell me that, oh, your dad would want you to keep going and, you know, keep going. Like, no, like, don't tell me what you think he would want me to do. He can tell me that myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting also, like, grief really is just so tricky, because personally for me, like, I can totally understand where you're coming from with that, but I think for me, I would be like, oh, that's so sweet to hear that you would think like that about me. And I think this is where, like, it gets really messy.
Yeah.
Grief is so tricky. We're going to have different experiences even though we've gone through a similar loss, you know?
Exactly.
And I think that's like the most important thing. It's just grief is tricky and it's ugly and it's messy.
Yeah. What was the one thing someone said to you that gave you hope for life again, or gave you encouragement again to keep going with your life?
So, like, I have a story. So, grief, I think, comes in waves. But, like, my sophomore year of high school, that whole year was super hard for me mentally. I was approaching how old my sisters were when my mom died, and I had just begun to, like, think in their perspective on the situation. And it was really emotionally taxing to be in, like, somewhat of the same shoes as them and realize how hard this must have been for them to be a high schooler and go through grief while your friends live the high school experience. Like, I remember my sister Caroline had a friend say to her, like, I don't want to be your friend anymore. You're not fun anymore. And she was like, my mom died. Like, give me a break. She was also around 6 months, I think, when that girl said that, just like you are. And, like, I bet if somebody said that to you, you would freak out, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's crazy. And also, I had lost, 3 people my sophomore year, and so I was just going through it. And I remember, like, wishing I could go back to a time when my mom was alive. And I was sitting in the kitchen, and my Aunt Karen and my sister Maddie were there talking. And Maddie was like, I'm going to go on a walk. And my aunt was like, oh, that's fun. I didn't know you liked walking. And Maddie was like, I like going on walks in nature because I feel more connected to my mom. And I realized that even though she isn't with me, like, my mom is still connected to me if I do things that make me feel connected to her. So, like, I'm still with her and respecting her and acknowledging our time together, while also creating new memories. So I started doing things that she liked doing, and it really pulled me out of the funk I was in. Like, I started, like, walking in nature more, like my mom liked to do, or going to the beach and running, and it really made me happier. It really also, like, made me feel like she was there, you know, and I felt really a lot better from it.
Yeah, that's nice. I would say, I think it's 2 things. Like, one thing, like my pop, that's my dad's father. You know,
Mm-hmm.
he's such a strong man, and I look at him as such a strong guy. And I kind of got to a point where I was comparing our grief together because I'm looking at him and he seems so strong. So it's like, you know, why can't I be like that? And
Mm-hmm.
you know, he's experienced a lot of loss himself. So by now he gets it and he understands it, but. The one thing he told me was, you know, we're not going to forget about it. We're not going to move on like people tell us to do. We're just going to live with it. And we're just going to, you know, live our lives and keep doing our thing. But, you know, we're not going to move on from it and we're not going to forget about it. And that taught me that it's okay to remember him from time to time. And it's okay to take a few days and maybe not, you know, not move on from it and not do what I'm supposed to do. But so long as I'm living my life and, you know, keeping my priorities in check, then I'm fine. And then me and my boss had a conversation after work, and she, you know, she taught me not to let the little things get me down too much, right? And if I do have a big problem, you know, talk about that big problem, address it, because this is a really big problem that I'm still dealing with. And so if I put this big problem to the side and let the little things get to me, then that big problem is just going to manifest and get bigger and bigger, and all my problems are just going to get big, and then I'm just going to burn out, and I don't want that. So I think it's just trying to keep those in mind. That's what keeps me going.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm. What's the one piece of advice that you would give to someone going through grief right now? I know you and I are talking right now, but anyone could be listening right now and going through grief. What would you say to that person?
So I asked my aunt her thoughts on this question, and I really liked her response. She said that apparently my dad had told her after she had lost her husband, like, the biggest thing that he learned was don't be afraid to ask for help. And that means, like, if you need somebody to cook you dinner one night because you can't cook, or, like, to as simple as just, like, texting somebody hi just to, like, boost your, like, emotions a little bit, you know? And she said that really helped her because you can really feel like a burden when you are going through grief because everyone seems to have moved on, but you haven't. And also just to know that that's not the case, and that, like, grief is tricky and it comes in waves and it's different for everyone. And you could have not felt grief for years, and then, like, one day process it, or, like, it could hit you for the first time the first day and then never again. Or I think you said that you just weren't feeling as upset as other people at first, and that made you feel like something was wrong with you. And just to know that nothing is wrong with you, like, everyone grieves differently, and, like, I don't know, I remember, like, with like, I don't know, I think that it's just important to understand that grief is tricky, essentially.
Yeah. I think with me, just talking about it more and, like you said, asking for help, I think that will help me get through it. Because sometimes I can be stubborn, and I think that I can do it myself, but I know God wants me to talk to other people and not just Him about the issue. So I think just talking about it more will help me, heal from it, and it won't be as emotional as it used to be, or that it still is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think also, like, with understanding grief with strangers and stuff, I think it needs to be sympathized with, not weaponized. Like, don't like belittle somebody else's grief because you're hurting. Like, I really despise that. I think that if you are going to, like, say, like, oh, well, they're not hurting as much as me, like, then you're just not thinking about anybody else but yourself, and that's also valid to do when you're grieving. I understand that, but I think that later on you'll look back and you'll be like, wow, why was I being so selfish about, I mean, you're allowed to be selfish when you grieve, but just to make sure that you understand other people are hurting with you. Like, if someone you love has passed away, then your friends probably are also affected by it and stuff,
Yeah, it's crazy how I think about other people's emotions, but not my own. So it's like, I could be having a bad day, and it's like, oh, I can't go around this person, or I can't be around this person, because then their mood is going to be affected by my mood. And it's like, I look at myself as the problem. And like you said, the burden. But I think as time, continues to go on, I'll get out of that mindset and be more comfortable with talking to people who will be there for me and will give me that support.
Mm-hmm. I read something that was like, about the way therapists are supposed to deal with you is to acknowledge, experience, and bear with you. And I think that just treat people the way you want to be treated, essentially.
Right,
like,
exactly.
Try to be as sympathetic as possible.
Right. Spread kindness and positivity. That's what makes people uplifted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Grace, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate your transparency on touching on your experience. It definitely helped me with my grief and what I'm going through. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you for having me. I'm really happy we had this conversation.
Yes, absolutely. It really helped me out a lot. Like, I was writing out the questions, and I was like, man, this is really bringing back a lot of emotions, and those emotions came out. But it was all worth it, because now I feel better expressing myself on it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk soon.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Yeah. This wraps up the podcast. Stay blessed and stay encouraged.